August 18, 1945, 3 days after Japan announced its surrender. Two B-32 Dominators lift off from Okinawa with no fighter escort and a photo reconnaissance assignment over Tokyo Bay. 14 Japanese fighters are waiting for them. What follows is the last air battle of the Pacific War. It kills the last American airman to die in combat in World War II. By mid-August 1945, the consolidated B-32 Dominator was one of the least-known heavy bombers in the theater. Only 118 were ever built. It had entered combat just 3 months earlier as a backup to the B-29. Its missions were long-range strikes for 5th Air Force out of the Philippines, and then Okinawa. The type was big, reliable, and largely ignored. That made it available when Far East Air Forces needed an airframe for a job nobody else was tasked with. The problem was straightforward. Japan had broadcast its intent to surrender, but commands across the Pacific needed evidence that Japanese forces were actually standing down. Airfields quiet, warships idle, barracks without movement. That meant photo reconnaissance overflights of the Tokyo-Yokohama area. The B-32 got the assignment because it had the range, the ceiling, and no competing schedule. On August 17th, 2 Dominators made the first run over the capital. They drew scattered anti-aircraft fire and were shadowed by fighters, but nobody engaged, and both aircraft returned to Okinawa intact. That should have been reassuring, but it also meant Japanese fighters were airborne and tracking. The second day would not go the same way. Photography dictated everything about how the crews had to fly. The cameras ran on fixed intervals, punching frames at set distances to maintain overlap and consistent scale. That meant long, straight, level passes with no banking, no evasion, and no course changes. If a pilot turned, the strip broke and the coverage was useless, so holding steady was not optional. The B-32 carried 4 remote-driven .50 caliber turrets in the nose, dorsal, ventral, and tail positions. Crews were told to return fire only if attacked, and to hold the camera run unless directly threatened. Before takeoff on the 18th, gunners briefed their firing arcs while photographers set exposure for forecast haze. A navigator taped wind corrections to his knee board. One of the waist gunners tucked a spare pair of gloves into the window frame. The metal ran warm in the sun, but would turn cold at altitude. Being tracked, but not attacked the day before, made today feel manageable. That was the problem. Tokyo Bay appears under the nose in flat gray light. The first fighters show up off the starboard beam, closing without weaving. They test the range with a shallow pass along the right side. The lead Dominator holds the photography line. The dorsal turret answers with short bursts, and the attacker breaks off. The interphone hisses once, and then goes quiet. 2 more come in head-on, starting shallow and then pitching steep. The nose turret picks them up early and lays tracer across their approach. Both shear off, one diving under the belly where the ventral turret cannot track fast enough. Through all of it, the altimeter needle does not move. Below, the cameras keep running. Frames punch down past docks, empty airstrips, and moored vessels. Then a third fighter rakes the waist section with a deflection burst from the port side. Glass shatters inward. A gunner ducks and swears. The camera operator keeps one hand braced on the film magazine so it does not jar loose. The smell of spent powder pushes through the open waist on the slipstream. The 2 bombers begin a slow turn to set up the next photo line. That is when the trailing aircraft takes a hard hit to the tail. The turret drive goes dead. Metal fragments scatter through the compartment, and gunners pour fire along the attacker's path until it slides out of arc. For a moment, the only sound is a spent casing rolling across the deck plating. Then comes the pass that changes everything. A spray of rounds finds the waist again. One of the photographers goes down, Sergeant Anthony Marchione, hit badly in the midsection. His partner grabs for a tourniquet and shouts for a medic kit. The pilot wants to dive and run, but the film line has roughly 30 seconds left to close the coverage loop. He calls to hold steady. The dorsal guns swing to cover the starboard side, while someone in the waist works a pressure bandage with unsteady hands. The fighters regroup and try a stern chase, hunting the dead zone behind the damaged tail turret. The tail gunner fights his drive back to life on manual input and feeds rounds into the wake. The top turret lays a curtain of fire behind both bombers. One attacker overshoots low, and a fourth joins the pass, but will not ride through the tracer. Hot brass rolls underfoot as the gunners shift position. Two more passes follow, quick and ragged, closer together, as if the pilots are checking whether the defensive fire has thinned. It has not. The Dominators have settled into a rhythm by now. Short bursts, throttles just under the red line, cameras still running on the final sweep. One fighter flashes close and peppers the nose glazing. The pilot adjusts a degree or two to shield the camera bay without ruining the strip. A loose panel above the navigator's table rattles once, then goes still. They break the last photo line and turn south toward open water. The fighters follow far enough to keep the pressure on. One beam attack tries to cut the corner before the waist gunners drive it wide. Tracers arc out over the sea and then stop. But one final pass from behind finds Marchione again. He is hit a second time. This wound is fatal. The radio operator calls for a bandage pack that will not be enough. The pilot eases them out to sea, and oxygen hisses softly through a cracked mask. Nobody on the interphone says a word. The last attackers fall back, then peel towards the coast. The tail gunner watches until the specks are gone. Only then does he lower his hands from the grips. On the climb to cruise altitude, the flight engineer leans the fuel mixture and pulls back the throttles. The navigator draws a line toward Okinawa on his chart. In the waist, the medic keeps working. Wind moves through the empty frame, where a window used to be. On the ramp at Yonton, ground crews meet the aircraft with stretchers. The film canisters come off with the same care as the wounded. Debrief officers collect damage reports, gun camera footage, and the reconnaissance photographs that survived the run. Sergeant Marchione dies of his wounds shortly after landing. He is the last American airman killed in air combat in the Second World War. Command responded within hours. All subsequent overflights were assigned fighter escort, and coordination between opposing airfields was tightened to prevent further intercepts. No significant air combat occurred over Tokyo on these missions again. On September 2, 1945, the formal surrender was signed aboard the USS Missouri. She was anchored in the same bay the Dominators had just photographed. A war does not end with one broadcast. It ends with verification flights, held camera runs, and decisions that still cost lives after the announcement has already been made. For more Pacific War missions reconstructed from crew records and original sources, subscribe.